Anyway, that was terrific. Anyway, I was asked to speak there, and so I put together a talk, and I'm going to repeat some of that, but I've amended that and added to it, so I hope there's a freshness to it for Pete and for Fred. Um, I want to imagine us all sitting in a cozy living room around a fireplace and maybe a glass of cocoa or maybe even a glass of wine in our hands, and sitting and talking together, because I think that's what works best when one presents a set of complicated ideas. So I've been asked to challenge you tonight, or to think about saving our democracy. But before we mount the barricades, which is a natural instinct, let us consider why democracy, this abstract, oft intoned and idealized notion, even matters. It is easy to say, of course, it matters. Let's turn to the task of defending it. Yet I find myself wondering, what does a world look like without it? In truth, we have come, and may come again, perilously close to losing it. Two prescient women alert us to how this can happen. Anne Applebaum, in her work, Twilight of Democracy, noted, the decline of democracy has crept upon us, and she warns we are sleepwalking toward autocracy, and we need to wake up. And Ruth Ben-Ghiat, author of Strong Men, reminds us democracies die through the ballot box, not the battlefield. We give it away. Their messages are important. Essentially, don't complacently give away democracy. So what does an American world without democracy look like? With the onset of globalism in the 20th century, two ideological, seductive extremes emerged: fascism and communism. In Germany, Italy, Spain, and Russia, the Western world suffered, and in some ways still struggles, with the consequences of profound economic disruption. This evening, we will not review the horrors of two world wars or the consequences of rapacious Soviet expansion. Our focus tonight is closer to home. Nonetheless, the conditions in Ukraine and Gaza can simply not be far from our collective sensibilities. Instead, however, we need to glance back 7 years to the present. What does the dismantling of democracy look like, and how have we experienced it? Well, first, the media becomes compromised. Earlier than most noticed, the media set the stage for class anger as the diverse term elitism peppered the airways with resentment. Gradually, in an alliance with the right wing, TV, radio, and social media, it systemically obscured the search for honesty. As alternative facts dwarfed truth and reality became confused with myth, we heard, and alas still hear, congressional leaders, along with more than 38% of Americans and 68% of Republicans, declaring that Biden is not the legitimate president, and that in the January 6th Capitol insurrection was an FBI plot. Lies you will undoubtedly recall, and lies is such an interesting word because you all remember, I'm sure you do, when the New York Times was originally hesitant to use that word to describe what Trump was saying. They have penetrated the airways, leaving as Rachel Maddow, whose birthday is today, incidentally, quipped, there are two different realities, Earth 1 and Earth 2. Now, secondly, the judiciary, overseen by Chief Justice Roberts, interestingly, a man whose career was based on opposing the 1965 Voters' Rights Amendment, marshaled the systemic dismantling of fair voting in our country as dark money saturated campaigns following the Citizens United decision. This right-leaning trend fails to support essential democratic principles, from denying the peril of voting suppression to repressing the right of women to exercise authority over their own bodies. We simply need glance at Alabama's Supreme Court's edict on IVF, intra vitro fertilization, which incidentally is a concern that is spreading across the country, or at Florida's ban on abortions today after 6 weeks of pregnancy. As SCOTUS lists toward originalism, the consequences are all too unsettling. for they slow walk too many of the urgent decisions we need adjudicated. And this slow walking is actually a conscious way for SCOTUS to behave. It's a way of slowing down the process of fair adjudication of our laws. Next, remember, historians tell us a dictatorship cannot occur without the support of institutional leaders. Thus, a cadre of congressional leaders, it was initially Mitch McConnell, Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, and Newt Gingrich, who gathered to thwart any progress during Obama's 8 years. They met in the very beginning of his inauguration to plot. They ultimately triumphed with the victory of a president who began his reign by falsely declaring such obvious deceits as, my inaugural crowd was bigger than Obama's. And he continued with 7 years of blind allegiance to the distortion of fairly obvious truths. Then the administrative state, defined as a swamp, was assailed, and we lost hundreds of professional diplomats and experts. As the promise to remove anyone not an ally of the past president hovers still, should he win election next year, the revenge politics becomes the norm and loyalty to a man and not a country. Lastly, the legitimacy of the government itself is questioned. It began with the ignoble assertion that Obama was not an American citizen, and continued as the plan to declare victory in 2020, regardless of the vote, was hatched months before the November election. The cabal eventually failed on January 6th. Nonetheless, plans to declare the Insurrection Act operational immediately upon retaking power to quell protests are on the MAGA planning board, and the details are available in a public document entitled Operation 2025, which I shall elucidate briefly in a few moments. It is a planning document, almost 900 pages, in print and available with a simple Google search. It makes clear intentions each of us might find virtually unimaginable. And finally, a confusing Christian nationalism has led evangelical Christians to see their candidate as our David and our Goliath, as faith organizations broadcast an allegiance to one party and one candidate. Indeed, we have seen that President Trump is now selling Bibles and talking about how every household in the country should have a Bible. And on the back of that sales, he is making money to help offset his legal costs. Now, this commitment to evangelical Christianity is clearly evident in Project 2025, as is a conflation of any progressive legislation with socialism, Marxism, and communism, all viewed as economic and cultural efforts that have eroded our society. So let me just repeat that. In Project 2025, which is the godchild of the help me.
The Federal Society?
The Heritage Foundation, right.
Heritage
Thank
Foundation,
you very much.
yeah.
No, it's the Heritage Foundation, sorry.
Yeah.
Is a conflation of any progressive legislation. So I'll do it again. In Project 2025, this is a conflation of any progressive legislation with socialism, Marxism, and communism. They are all viewed as economic and I'm sorry about the ringing in the background, all viewed as economic and cultural efforts that have eroded our society. Father Coughlin, the 1936 Boston-based pro-Nazi fascist, and if you haven't read or listened to Prequel, Rachel Maddow's newest book, I would urge you to do so. He would be, Father Coughlin, entirely comfortable with this Heritage Foundation report. In fact, the McCarthy hearings were disappointing to the Heritage Foundation in their document, only because they were not successful in rooting out the malevolent elements in our society. Lest you think I exaggerate or employ hyperbole, let us briefly briefly examine 10 central tenets of the report in its own language, not mine. The enemy, besides progressive legislators, is clearly, incidentally, China. The details are copious. My summary is brief. Number one, all progressive legislation is equivalent, we've said this before now, to socialism and Marxism. Therefore, all intrusions by China are evil and must be eradicated. Two, the American family is imperiled. The church needs to be at the center of every family's life. Restore the family as the centerpiece of American life to protect our children. Inflation is ravaging family budgets. Drug overdose deaths continue to escalate. The children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism, with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. The greatest pro-family win in a generation is overturning Roe versus Wade. The Dobbs decision, the report intones, is just the beginning. After all, 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of Black children. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts. We must eliminate that immediately. LGBT, incidentally, no Q in their writing, replaced people's natural loves and loyalties with unnatural ones. Biological males dominating women's sports, rampant violence, and a crisis in education not seen in decades prevails. Deleting the following terms: sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion gender equity, and gender equality, and gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, productive health, productive reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights must be eradicated. Number 4, break up the Department of Education. Parental authority over their children's education is a simple one. Schools serve parents, not the other way around. Fight for universal school choice. Pornography, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, is intolerable. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. The noxious tenets of critical race theory, we knew that was coming, right? And gender ideology should be excised from all curriculum. Number 5, restore the integrity of the Department of Justice to ensure accountability by giving the FBI a hard rest, ensuring consistent litigation decisions, and enforcing immigration laws. Solidify the border by restructuring the entire Department of the Homeland Security and its priorities in ways that streamline the immigration process and unclear immigration visas, and create a more secure immigration process. Illegal immigration should be ended, not mitigated. The border sealed, not reprioritized. Defend our nation's.
Katie Proctor.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. This is our daughter, Katie. I'm in the middle of a program. Thank you. Solidify our border by restructuring. I said that already. I'm sorry. End unclear immigration visas and create a more secure immigration process. Illegal immigration should be ended, not mitigated. The border sealed, not reprioritized. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. Few of us will forget Biden's first gesture when he became president was to stop all Islamic immigration into our country. Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. It's not dysfunction, it's corruption. And despite its gaudy price tag, the federal budget is not even close to the worst example of this corruption. That distinction belongs to the administrative state, the dismantling of which must be a top priority for the next conservative president. By firing and replacing up to 50,000 people, and there is a way they've worked out to do that. 8, a combination of elected and unelected bureaucrats in the Environmental Protection Agency. It quietly strangles domestic energy and production through difficult to understand rulemaking processes. Environmental extremism is decidedly anti-human. And it goes on to demonstrate, to argue that any environmental behavior that suggests that there really is a climate crisis is irresponsible and dangerous. It is our natural resources that we need to cherish, oil and natural gas. The Defense Department needs to change their priorities. Woke bureaucrats at the Pentagon force troops to attend training seminars about white privilege. The American people desire a military full of skilled servicemen and women who can protect the homeland and our interests overseas and restore war fighting as its sole mission and set defeating the threat of the Chinese Communist Party as its highest priority. And last but not least, number 10, the CDC must change. The CDC points to the Christian fundamentalist sensibilities that also inform this visceral disdain. How much risk mitigation, the report asks, is worth the price of shutting down churches on the holiest day of the Christian calendar and far beyond, as happened in 2020? What is the proper balance of lives saved versus souls saved? Anti-mask mandates, anti-COVID, anti-vaccines. The recommendation, therefore, is to disempower the CDC, take it apart, and split it into two different entities. The CDC to play a key role in one very specific way going forward as part of a larger crusade against abortion rights. And so we see the systematic change of our federal government with the American family, hostility to China, fear of progressive legislation, concern about LGBT folks, any kind of discussion of equity, eradication of the Department of Education, environmental protection, a refurbishing of the Defense Department, and a change in the CDC. Thus, to summarize the early points, the corruption of the media, the influence of federalist-oriented courts, the undermining of the legitimacy and integrity of government and its institutions, along with the collaboration of partisan allies, can lead quietly but persistently to the dismantling of what most would define as democracy. So we ask ourselves, what can people who wish to sustain democracy do? To begin, tell folks that democracy is not a partisan issue. Democracy belongs to no specific party. It belongs to everyone. Timothy Snyder of Yale, who wrote On Tyranny, has been banging the drums of concern since 2017. And David Pepper, Ohio's brilliant oracle, who penned Laboratories of Autocracy, followed by Saving Democracy, a user's manual for every American, can guide us toward constructive, healthy paths as they map actions to help us stay alert and make a difference, even from Massachusetts. So here is what they say. 1, resist obedience to even the smallest of undemocratic incursions. For a simple example, when pressures emerge to ban books in our schools, depicting, for example, the history of slavery, do we tolerate these demands? Or as dangerously brush them off as merely the craziness of an extremist group of little consequence? 9% of all public school texts are published in Texas. It took the Nazis less than 1 year to consolidate control of all German texts. Number 2. So the first one is resist obedience. Number 2, be wary of a one-party state. Oh, not a problem here, you might scoff. But most Russians in 1990 did not imagine that that day would mark their last free election. Through voter manipulation, voter restrictions, and the influence of vast financial resources, a state can be easily turned from purple or even blue to red. David Pepper documents this precise transition in Ohio. Number 3, guard the symbols and language of democracy. Preserve them. For example, the American flag. Has it become the preserve of one party? When I drive down the street and I see an American flag outside the house, I must admit, I think, I wonder if this is a Republican house. I should never have that thought cross my mind. What do we mean when speaking of family values? Does it mean hostility to LGBTQ plus families, or to the presence of feminism, or to even attendance at public schools? All of which the 2025 report says, let's eradicate. Let's recapture that phrase, family values, and make it our own. And let's articulate what those family values are. Number 4, watch paramilitarism. When police, National Guards, and unauthorized armies commingle, this concern is particularly important with the emphasis on federalism in our society, because local governors can create legitimate forces. For example, state police or call out the National Guard. Simply be aware, because even though a state may be across the continent, it should not diminish our concern. Recent pledges to free all those indicted for insurrection leave rational folks to shudder. And when declarations to lock up the criminals on the radical left who are, quote, destroying our country are invoked, the notion of courage, individual courage, takes on a different dimension. And last, become, and I'm sure you already are, broadly read. Listen to podcasts, investigate, avoid provincial complacency. Have the courage to act. Make, as John Lewis urged, good trouble. Become deeply involved and combine knowledge with action. Action is the greatest remedy for anxiety. It is tempting to be overwhelmed and simply stop paying attention, or conversely to believe, oh, that's not really a problem. There's much ado about nothing. It will all be fine. Neither posture is wise. Join groups that are protecting democracy, whether they're in your church, whether they're in a community organization. Write commentaries to your local newspaper or write blogs or local newsletters. Be among those who count. Ruth Bader Ginsburg often quoted Justice Louis Brandeis's famous line, "The greatest menace to freedom is an inert people." And she advised people to fight for the things you care about, but to do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Which is an interesting challenge, isn't it? How do we express our concerns without driving people away, without being in the barricades? As we embrace courage and conviction, there is the tone we use, not just the outward voice, but perhaps more importantly, the inner voice. Speak and act with urgent serenity. I'm reminded of the 2 words in our home that we have schooled our 8-year-old granddaughter, and long ago our children, never to use: bored and hate. The world is simply far too interesting to ever be bored, and hatred has no place in a peaceful home. As Ruth Ben-Ghiat notes, opening one's heart to others and viewing them with compassion has time and again led to effective electoral pushback against strongman rule. For example, and I was fascinated by this, the Chilean opposition's "Joy is on the way" 1988 campaign drove Pinochet out of office. Can we imagine such a line today? Not a line of anger and rage, although to some degree rage motivates, but can we inspire through an equally positive statement? Screaming from the barricades may only cause entrenched battle lines to form. You know, when Alexei Navalny, the recent victim of Putin's autocracy, was asked what message he would leave for the Russian people if he were killed, he said, listen, I've got something very obvious to tell you. You're not allowed to give up. If they decide to kill me, it means that we are incredibly strong. We need to utilize this power to not give up, to remember we are a huge power that is being oppressed, and I love this, by these bad dudes. I haven't really thought of Putin as a bad dude, but apparently Navalny did. We don't realize how strong we actually are. Acting with informed clarity, mixed with patient love, may be the way to disarm those who argue, as I heard a man recently declare, we need a dictatorship to get things done in this country. Help all to see that when power is not shared, they may eventually come for you. Thank you very much. So that's it, Andy.
Thank you, Diane.
But I'd love to hear comments and responses and thoughts. It would be fantastic.
Yes. How do we look, Pamela?
Um,
I would ask if you have a question, just please use the raised hand and we'll answer them in order. But what do you see, Pamela, in the chat?
I think that there aren't any questions in here. There's a few comments. Diane, how do we switch the attention of the media from identity politics and he said, she said, back to objective reporting on the actual issues and the things that politicians have done versus what they say?
Well, I'm going to quote Rachel Maddow, Pamela, for a minute. She said, don't watch what they say, watch what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Again and again, observe action, not language, because it's through actions that we really understand, what they intend to do. What they say is one thing, and they can say placating things. They can do ameliorating things. I just heard Trump say this afternoon that, or one of his minions say, well, we're not going to adjudicate. We're not going to keep talking about this election. It's too divisive. We're a positive group. We're going forward. Well, I believe that about as far as anybody can throw me, and I'm not a light lady. They couldn't throw me very far. I don't think they can't contain themselves on this particular issue. So let's watch them. Let's see what they do. I think that the collaboration of money and the kind of favors that are already being doled out. For instance, there's a guy named Yaz, Y-A-A-S, who is in the who is the head, or if not the head, he's very much involved in the Council of Rome. Is that the name of it? The Council of Rome? It's very close to that. At any rate, he's a billionaire, and he has just given Trump a lot of money to help offset his costs for his legal battles. And he's been apparently promised the Secretary of Treasury position. Now, whether any of Trump's promises mean anything or whether it's just hot air is hard to tell. But when favors are being doled out already from one pocket or another, we know that people with a lot of money want influence, and they're going to be given it by someone who lacks essentially principles. So I don't know if does that address in any way your question, Pamela, or not?
No.
Ask it again. Okay.
Because the media is not watching what they do and reporting on it. The media is reporting what they say, which reinforces what they say, even when the reporting is to be outraged by it.
Well, I think you're essentially right, but there are reporters who are addressing it. The group that's not is well, let me just tell you a story, because to me it suggests an answer, or at least a concern that I share with you, Pamela, so deeply. And here it is. During the Iowa, we all remember this, the Iowa, the Iowa primary months and months and months ago. In the Iowa primary, there was a correspondent whose face we would all recognize, whose name I don't know. But he said, you know, I'm out here in Iowa and I'm stunned. He said, I bring things up and they don't know what I'm talking about. I bring up points and they've never heard them. So I started listening to the local radios, reading the local newspapers, watching the local television. And the very concerns that you and I might be able to discern by watching CNN or MSNBC, reading the Washington Post, reading the New York Times, reading the Los Angeles Times, reading the Atlantic Monthly, reading the New Yorker, those ideas are invisible to so many people in our country. It allowed me to forgive a lot of people who vote in ways that make no sense to me whatsoever. Because if you don't know it, it's very hard, to make kind of what I might discern as rational, thinking or rational decisions. On the other hand, the control of Sinclair News on all the radio stations, the control of Fox News. Do you know that when even in Massachusetts, we subscribe to cable news, guess what? We automatically get Fox News whether we want it or not. It's bundled with any cable application. So the only way to disbundle that is to stop using cable television and find other ways of watching television. So, it's a huge monopoly. And it's a monopoly, as you suggest, Pamela, of ideas, and a monopoly of a point of view, which is not productive. Now, some of us might also, just one more parenthetical comment. Some of us might also be a little frustrated sometimes by PBS. And I believe I've heard you say that, Pamela. Where there have been times when I wanted to pick up a shoe and throw it. I don't do that kind of thing. Throw it at the PBS news hour because of their urgency to keep a multi-perspective. They're getting, I've been watching pretty carefully recently, and they're getting a little more balanced. There is a sense of moral responsibility here that I think we all need to emphasize. And, we can stop giving to PBS. We can say to them, I've been a donor for 50 years, but I'm not going to be any longer under these circumstances. There are ways to put pressure. And it really requires all of us to act in that regard.
We have some raised
Joyce?
hands.
Yes.
Yes.
Joyce, would you unmute? Oh, Joyce?
Yes. First of all, it's Diane, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, I found your presentation to be extremely interesting, but I just wanted to make sure that I might have misunderstood you. That I thought you said that Biden's first month of presidency, he banned all Muslim
She
immigrants.
misspoke.
Oh,
You
oh,
misspoke.
if I misspeak, I apologize. I meant.
Yeah, that's
okay.
all. I just wanted to clarify
I'm sorry.
that.
It's a name I tend to try not to use, so Biden flipped out. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
No,
That's
of
all.
course
I
it
just
was not he who
wanted to
did that.
clarify that.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Joyce, for catching me with that mistake.
Well, no, but it's
appreciate it.
very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Laurie.
right, Lori Gill.
Hi, Diane.
Hi,
I just
Laurie.
want to show you.
Ah.
I picked up a copy and
Yay.
interesting comments in the chat, but I'm looking forward to reading it. Diane, I have a question for you based on a lot of the readings that we've done with the League this year. And of course, the League has been reading forever, but I recently joined. And so I don't have the full scope. But a lot of them seem to suggest that to get back to a fairer democracy, I think you hear my parrot in the background, excuse him. We need to do things like ranked choice voting, and the electoral college is a big problem. And I'm wondering, when I see advice on how to maintain the democracy, it's still it's hard to put your arms around and say, well, this is the action that I'm going to take to affect that. And I actually, when Biden became president, I was pretty disappointed that he did not tackle some of these broader issues at the time. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you think that we would be in a different place if instead of trying, I mean, I know he was doing great things for people, but people don't understand what he's doing for them.
They don't.
They
Yeah.
simply do not hear or listen. They're much more willing to, it's based on the emotion of the whole situation. If you start getting people riled up, that emotion will carry them in many unfortunate directions. But I'm wondering from your perspective, if Biden and the Democratic Party, when Biden took office, had spent the bulk of the time trying to put things right, to take care of institutions like the Electoral College and ranked choice voting and whatever, if that's where their effort had gone, could we possibly be in a better place today?
Well, Laurie, this is it's a wonderful question, and it's also a complicated one. So let's first address ranked choice voting.
Okay.
It ends up that in the Constitution, states determine how the voting takes place. So what we would have to do is get a lot of individual states, as Alaska and Maine have, to embrace ranked choice voting. And there seems to be absolute uniformity of opinion that when you have ranked choice voting, the elections become less divisive. Because if you want to be number two, you don't want to attack number one. So you try to find ways to cozy up to somebody else so that if number one doesn't get a majority, people will say, oh yes, but Laurie was great. Diane was okay, but I didn't like her perspective. But Laurie, she was terrific. So I'll put Laurie second. And then guess what? Laurie can emerge as the victor. So it tends to diminish the rancor that we see so often, the divisive tone that's out there right now. So that's, but that is by state by state. But here is one of the tricky things. There's a lot of interest in people in having a new constitutional convention, to look at the Constitution. But guess what? If that were dominated by what I consider to be the less, I'm going to just use a different word, the malevolent voices, we could find ourselves in a situation that is irreconcilable and unrecoverable. It would be awful. So wise voices, and Nancy McLean, if you've read her work, is a particularly brilliant analyst of this. It's dangerous. Somehow we have to work within the Constitution, I fear that we have. And what comes with that right now is the Electoral College. And the only way to change that would be to get the legislature in Congress to reverse that way of balancing our voting. And you can see, what happens? We end up discovering that there are 5 states that matter. And in those 5 states, by margins of thousands of votes only, we need to make a difference. So, does it become irrelevant how other people vote? No, it doesn't. But it becomes less relevant than if you were in one of those 5 or maybe 6 major states in the country right now. I keep thinking, Laurie, that what we need to do is to find a slogan, a way of talking about why this needs to change. I can list, I read, much of the bloody 900-page report of the Project 2025. And I just came out of it weary with the vitriol and the anger and the sense of hostility to the vitality of our country and to the joy of our country. And when I read Ruth Ben-Ghiat's example of Chile and the fact that they found a slogan, return joy to our country, could that's not going to work because that's the kind of thing Trump uses, but could we find a slogan that would bring back the vitality, the energy of our youth, of the disenfranchised, and get them to get out and vote? It seems to me we need brilliant marketers to find that slogan, because that, I think, Fred Van Dusen talks about, we need a movement. because it ends up that the Republican Party knows how to, I mean, Trump has said, he's damn clever. He knows how to get people riled up and going. We don't. I don't know how many of you on this call are Democrats, but I will confess to being a Democrat, and I find myself being frustrated by our inactivity, by our lack of, we get down and out in all the details and all the legislation when we need, in fact, to just inspire people. And
Well,
until that happens, we really, now, if you're looking for a very good list, says Fred Friend, who's in here, I just saw him. If you're looking for a very good list of, of ways for good actions you can take and save our democracy, go to this link. Thank you, Fred.
great.
Okay. So Laurie,
But it's
that
partially that they're winning in the battle to wipe out hope. I think when you ask the question,
right.
who's going to win, and everybody thinks Trump is going to win, that's a signal that they are winning.
Yeah, if we
And
get
somehow we have to counter.
if we get one more editorial, one more title on an article in the New York Times that says 81 is too old, I'm thinking, no, it's not. It's not too old. Get off it. Yes, he has arthritis, so he doesn't walk briskly down the lane, but so what we have to do is say, brisk walking with arthritis, how many of us have it? But damn, when he walks, does so with purpose. I mean, something that changes the tone. We've got to get on the defense in the best sense, in the most positive sense. We've got to recover what our family values. What do we care about? And we've got to make those things so incredibly clear. Or I think, and coupled with letting everybody know what will happen if it doesn't, somehow that balance needs to happen. So, well, that's my sense. I mean, actually, nobody's hired me to run their campaign yet, but if they did. So, Laurie, I love you and thank you so much. Luann.
I was going to say, as I listen and think about all of the media people, that one of the things that I think really is a problem in terms of democracy, that if you're on one side, you don't have a lot of access to the other side.
That's
I
right.
mean, the only times I hear, I've heard Trump speak, and the only time I heard that Bible commercial was on Jon Stewart, which is a very very partisan. And the people, and I think that, at the same time, the people who are Trump supporters aren't getting a balanced view.
That's right.
So I think it's not just that we have partisan media, we have, partisan media people as well as other people, but the fact that they're all off in their own little quarters and they aren't talking. I don't think we should be talking about not bundling Fox News. I think everybody should be watching Fox News occasionally to see what people are doing.
Well, you're a brave soul. You're a brave soul, Luann. I make myself listen to the to various conservative podcasts and listen occasionally to Fox News. I find myself needing to stay healthy. It doesn't serve my blood pressure well, but good for you for watching it and listening to it. I heard a fantastic discussion, and it's had a huge influence on me, between David Remnick and Adam Gopnik. Now, Adam Gopnik is somebody I've known for many years. I taught writing for generations, and he's an essayist who I admire deeply. And so when he would come to Boston to speak, I would always take my classes in to hear him, my essay writing classes. And so I got to know him personally because there we were, a whole group of students sitting in one of his talks at the Harvard bookstore sessions. And Adam Gopnik said something with David Remnick because they went back and forth. David said, don't we just need to to just be, really positive and find some way of supporting Biden? And Adam Gopnik came back and he said, no, we have to say every day, in everything we write and in everything we do, that this whole movement is dangerous. It's destructive to the fabric of democracy in our country, and we have a responsibility. Now, this is from a magazine's perspective. We have a responsibility to say this again and again and again till it begins to be so axiomatic, so absolutely clear that people can't walk away from it. And I was so interested to hear somebody in the media say, no, people, so David Remnick came back and he said, yeah, but people want something new. They want something fresh. That's what news means, something we haven't heard before. And Adam Gopnik said, no, we don't. We need to thwart that intentionality, that hunger for something new. We need to make clear that what is new is how they think about the implications of living in a society that deprives them of choice, that deprives them of freedom, that deprives them of a public school education, that makes public schools that eradicates public schools and makes them essentially Catholic schools, Christian schools of one kind or another. If that's what you want, if that's what our whole country wants, well, maybe that's what we'll have. But if it's not what we want, and we don't understand the unintended consequences of enjoying Trump's humor and going to a rally, then we really have to think carefully and clearly about the implications of the choices we make. I'm sounding a little bombastic, so I will back off. Ellen, hello, my friend. Hi, Ellen.
Hi. So I love the idea of coming up with a new slogan. And the more I read about, when you say you go to Iowa and people don't have a clue what's we in the East and the coasts are reading, I wonder if something like really simple, like return fairness, because basically our economics, the way it works now, is not fair. CEOs should not pay lower taxes than their secretaries, or Fortune 100 companies shouldn't pay lower taxes than my hairdresser. Just something that would hit people on the kitchen table, so they go, wait a minute, how can that be? Because I think it's a lack of fairness, and that's really what Trump's about. It's about returning favors to buddies, and it's always the top 1/10 of 1%. And I don't know why people aren't outraged, and maybe you just need to kind of hit in the face. And, barring that, now that I'm retired, I will dedicate myself to going wherever I need to go to get to those dozen counties that matter in October.
Well, it's so interesting, Ellen, that's so beautiful. One of the researches that people are discerning is that postcards matter. David Pepper, when asked, I asked him, David Pepper in a presentation that he gave, so what matters? He said postcards. He said a postcard to he was talking specifically about Ohio, having to do with the abortion vote. Because there were all sorts of shenanigans that Ohio did they ran a vote in the middle of the summer when they thought no one would know what they were doing, and it would just kind of scoot right through. Then they ran another one very close, which incidentally, watch our voting patterns, because the Secretary of State in Massachusetts oftentimes puts elections right near Labor Day, when people are coming back and they're disoriented and they're trying to get their families organized, and so people don't vote. And they pick the familiar, or if they do vote, they pick the familiar. So we're not so perfect in all this, but in any case, that it's something worth watching. It's something worth addressing as a community. But nonetheless, he said that when people in Ohio got postcards from people in Massachusetts that said, "We're with you," here's where you have to vote, or here's the methodology, and indicated support. He said people thought, oh my gosh, what I'm doing matters. People are noticing. And it made people feel important. And people need to feel like what they do and what their actions they take matter, that they are important. And so postcards are really one thing we can do. The second thing is, and this is really very interesting to me, the research that any number of organizations have undertaken is that neighbor to neighbor is the right way to influence voting patterns. that if we went out, and whether it's with Swing Blue Alliance, or whether it was with Concord Indivisible, or whether it was through Indivisibles around the country, if people went out and worked with neighbors and helped them to figure out how to bring to a coffee all their neighbors and then present something, that's more powerful than strangers going door to door and knocking. That people may may placate you when you're there, or they may throw you out, but that's not where the conversion happens. The conversion is tough. Conversion is difficult, but guess what? The strongest conversion happens with peer pressure. So that we have an election going on right here in Concord. You know, when I've had more people call me and say, all right, how should I vote? What should I do? Well, I'm disinclined to kind of say, here's what you should do, but we can have some good conversations around it. Peer pressure is powerful, and that may be more important than, and Ellen, I love that you want to get out there, and I do too. I want to just hop in a car and go to Pennsylvania. But I mean, but nonetheless, and Janet Rothrock, I think she was on this call. I don't know if she still is, but Janet has friends in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and family in Pennsylvania. You know, we could all get in a car and head on out. But the bottom line is, maybe what we need to do is to empower neighborhood gatherings. You know, a barbecue around something, a cup of tea where everybody comes. I'm a tea drinker,
Right.
but maybe people would
I
say,
mean, I think it's what I love about Concord Indivisible, all the various groups, is the awful math of how few counties matter, and know whether we write postcards or whether we go there and, you know, do a barbecue and corn bake and stay in the background and make coffee. There's got to be, I mean, I agree with you. I think I invite people to a coffee, the people I support for the various local town positions. And basically, I don't want to care if they come to my coffee. I just want them to read that I've invited them and this is somebody I support. And I think that you're right, that makes a difference.
absolutely. And we need to work with, I've just caught very quickly, I'm not able to follow the chat box very successfully, and I apologize for that, but a comment about Black voters. I mean, we've got to get Black people to get out and talk to their neighbors and their friends and talk about why certain voting matters. There's a group called American something, I'll get it in a second in my ancient brain, but at any rate, where they work with they establish relationships with working class Americans, working America, working America, and they establish long-term relationships with people who are in whatever we describe today as the working class, and they help them with all sorts of things. So if they're in a union, you know, how do you connect with your union? What do you do? Are you having trouble getting welfare? Are you having trouble getting, you know, Obamacare? Are you having trouble getting the health care you need? And so they establish working relationships with people. So when they then turn around and say, my gosh, you know, voting for Blump Blump matters, then they're believed. I think it's a question of credibility, isn't it? And for some reason, Trump seems to have credibility with people. And in order to reverse that, we've got to find a way to be creditable on Earth 1, not on Earth 2. Andy, did you have a question?
Basically, I was just going to make a comment that I've been following the 2025, and it is horrible, but I'm reminded of when Trump came into office in 2017. First of all, he didn't expect to win, but he had no plan. He didn't really know what to do, and he kind of fumbled around, and you know, the country was in shock, or half the country was in shock. And finally, he started with the executive actions, which was, you know, quick.
Absolutely.
And then this time, they're going to remedy that. That's why they're spending so much time. And the president normally, I think it's like, is it maybe 4,000 jobs, appointees that a new president is responsible for, the administrative side. And they are going to, I mean, it really looks dire to me. I think people need to know more about Project 2025.
You are so right, Andy. And in fact, these 50,000 jobs that they're talking about, they're already interviewing. They're creating databases out there right now. And that, you know, it's not surprising that the very first question is who won the presidency? You know, what perspective do you have?
Oh.
You know, what organizations have you worked with? I mean, so there's a vetting going on right now, not unlike what they did with this with SCOTUS. And we all watched Mitch McConnell manipulate that entire voting process, right?
Mhm.
I mean, excuse me, when Obama wanted to elect somebody, oh no, it's too close to the election, you can't do it, and blocked it. Then when he wanted to, bam, practically November 20th, he was pushing somebody through.
Why
So-
didn't the Democrats stop him?
Well, there you go, because we didn't
I am
have,
frustrated with the willingness to let constitutional breaking happen in this
I
effort to be above the fray.
I could
And
not
the
agree.
result is that neither party fights for the people.
Well, Pamela, you're so right, and it is extraordinarily frustrating. And we are in an imperfect system, aren't we? In this republic, as you know, as we all know, it is not a perfect system, which means all the more we have to be educated, know exactly how it works, and do our very best to address those concerns in a way that doesn't that doesn't inflame the other side and make us look somehow, hyperbolic and irrational.
We
And-
already look that way to them.
Well, we
That's
might.
a non-issue. We
Well,
have to actually accomplish things. It doesn't matter how we look to them.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you. We've got a huge country to move.
We have a raised hand, Joyce.
Joyce?
Yes, well, back to the frustration, excuse me, for when Mitch McConnell was able to pass that last after Obama. Yeah, no, after Biden had already been elected, correct. But the Democrats didn't have the vote in the Senate. And at one point, I remember reading someplace that Obama, when he still had a full, we were in the majority, that someone suggested to him that he have a little private luncheon with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that maybe if she might retire, and so everyone adores this woman. And I find that I don't adore her as much as I did one time, because I think we have a problem with people staying on, thank Diane Feinstein, too long, because it's part of their life, and without thinking of what, and that was, anyway, that was
No,
what happened.
Joyce, that's such an important comment. Our kids, I'm going to go get something and show it to you for just a second. I promise this is a half a second move. Our kids gave me an action figure many Christmases ago. Because all the kids were getting toys, and they said, "Oh, you have to have a toy." And so they gave me this action figure of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so she sits on our table in our living room. And yet I do look at her with complexity. Had
Yeah.
she retired earlier, and she was very ill. I mean, she knew she was very ill. Had she retired earlier, we'd have at least a slightly more balanced SCOTUS than we do right now.
Absolutely. And
Or
even-
had Sandra Day O'Connor stayed on.
Well, oh, hello. Sandra Day O'Connor says that the one vote she regrets, oh my heavens, what a thought, is the one that put Bush in the presidency.
Yes.
And yeah, so it just breaks my heart that but the what ifs are not, unfortunately, don't help us very much, do they? But they do
Can we
remind us.
can we make the Democrats contest their rigged elections the way Trump did 2020? We
Well,
should.
that's
If
what
Hillary
we-
had done that, Trump probably would not have been elected, because the few states in which as Jill Stein got enough funding to challenge the results in those states, her challenge was tossed out of the courts because she didn't have standing, because a change in the result would not have affected her, but they would have affected Hillary.
Yeah.
And also one of my heroes, Al Gore, should have challenged
Yeah,
the
he should have.
2020 election. He did win.
Yep, he did.
Probably Hillary actually did win.
Well, I
We
don't know
have
about
another
that,
raised
but
hand.
I think
But
Al
we'll never
Gore-
know.
Diane,
Could
hello.
we go to our raised hand, please?
Yes,
Sorry.
Diane. Hi,
Oh,
it's good to see you.
Hi. I just want to go back to a few things. First of all, I do watch Trump. I watch, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. I do watch Fox, because I always want to know what they're doing. I want to know what they're doing from their perspective. So that's just one thing. But another thing is,
I admire that so much. Go ahead.
well, I have more tolerance for, I can watch it and then not get so angry that I'm not able to act, But the other thing is, I want to go back to just keeping messages simpler for the general public, because most people, I mean, we're all very privileged people here. We have lots of time in our hands to do a lot of research, a lot of analysis, etc. But most people don't. They're just surviving on, on a day-to-day basis. Now, what Trump is really good at is keeping things simple and either threatening them, not threatening them. Well, he does threaten, but he highlights the good things that he can do, and he highlights all the dangers that the opposition is doing. And he keeps it so simple that people, know how to make a decision. And he approaches things such that they feel it in their bones, and they feel it at their survival level. And most people are only at a survival level. The Democrats tend to forget that they have to address those survival level. And of course, the Democrats came up because they won, because they were helping. They were always the party, of the worker who wasn't being paid enough, et cetera, et cetera. So that they've lost some of those skills along the way. Now, in terms of postcarding, I've worked for both Obama and Biden on postcarding, and I've worked through the Democratic, National Committee advisors, because they strategically know, which counties to go into and how much force is needed in order to, to win that particular county. So let them do the strategizing. We don't have time to do that kind of strategizing, but we can be very effective at, at addressing the very people that need addressing. Give people positive reasons, for voting, not just, they need to know what personal benefit they're going to get. Now, the reason that the women, came out in droves is that they knew that if they did not vote, their bodies would be personally harmed. And that was a major thing, major motivator. So in terms of, keep the slogans, quite directed. And all of us can do strategizing and more complex things, but we can't forget, that the messages have to reach the very people, and we know which people have to be reached. We know where the numbers are, and we know where the critical states are.
Well, Diane, that's spot on, right? And working with people on the ground who know what they're doing, it allows us to be more effective, doesn't it?
Right.
In terms of our behavior and our work.
Yeah.
And I noticed in one of the comments in the chat is we can't go backwards. We can't complain about what's happened. We have to go
Right.
forward. We have to, we have to figure out, okay, yes, there have been some things that are frustrating for all of us and disappoint all of us. But what we now have to do is to find the right way to go forward.
Right.
Grab those things we care about. Make family issues ours, not somebody else's. Make them up.
Keep it simple, stupid, and also make sure that you're speaking to their economic needs. Everyone acts on economics, everyone, no matter who it is.
It is the money, stupid.
Yeah.
It's the economy, stupid. Again and again, we've discerned that, have we not? So that, it is, I hope, I don't know this for sure, but if inflation continues to abate, it may be that eventually in the pocketbooks of individuals, we will go to grocery stores and begin to see that, oh my gosh, it's working. Joyce. Whoops, you need to unmute, hon.
What I wanted to say, I'm glad to hear that postcard writing is effective. I just did 50 for Act and Indivisible, but these weren't, I mean, basically it was notifying the people. They went out to Pennsylvania, and I'm sure that it's nicer if you print the address. I have to say that I just put the printed out ones because they were long print, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and a lot of them were to our friends, but it basically was saying they weren't registered to vote, and you were just saying, please register. The ones I think I did 150 for Biden. Those were good. I got them either through First Parish or the Act and Indivisible, but I sat down in front of Concord Library, and I don't want to say I wrote, I printed. You have to print them out.
Yes, you do.
And
Not everybody can read our handwriting.
right. And that had there were a couple different dialogues in all those postcards, but they had very good statements. And of course those went to Georgia. And so the addresses were much easier. I'm happy to know that makes a difference because okay.
It really does. And the more personal, just a little note on the bottom in handwritten makes all the difference, according to David.
Well, that's what these were. Just, said, please, and ask a friend to register. But the ones that we wrote for Biden, they to Georgia were very, very long dialogue. We printed out, but it's okay. I'm glad to hear they're effective, and I won't use any more
Thank you
time.
so much. Hi.
Have you actually seen the statistics that prove that they're effective
Yes.
rather than
David-
word of mouth?
David Pepper has them. Kai, I think, has her hand raised. Kai, hello.
You're muted, Kai.
Sorry, sorry.
That's okay. No sorry to be had. Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to say, Diane, thank you so much for your presentation. And also, you've got a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
And so one thing I've noticed, you probably won't like me saying this openly, but in case anyone else has noticed this, I want to give you support. You put yourself down a lot, and you seem incredible. You seem absolutely wonderful.
Thank you very
So
much.
please, try to be nicer to yourself if you can.
Well, I think humility is critical in life. So, but thank you. That's very kind of you. Hi,
Yeah.
hi, Pete.
I
Good
just
to-
wanted to, oh, sorry, I wanted
go
to,
ahead.
I wanted to respond to Dave well, I wanted to say Grabel, but it's Grabel, I think. And a few other people who have spoken here are asking about what we can do about Trump. I know that there are several things that can be done in regard to Donald Trump. One of them, first of all, I'll read the part that really got me thinking. I wanted to respond to Dave. He asks, and he basically says in Massachusetts, we're preaching to the choir. How do we begin to turn the tide when Trump compares himself to Jesus Christ
Right.
and his followers embrace him further? The more he gets indicted, the more they love him. What can really be done? Okay, that's a fantastic question, bringing up the fact that Donald Trump IDs himself as if he is a god. And Putin does this too, but he wants to be referred to as daddy, as father. They both have a personality disorder that I know very well. I grew up in a household with people like Putin and Trump. I've known people like that my entire life. And what can be done? There are a few things. The first is educate everyone on these disorders, on how they
interesting.
operate, someone has their mic open, how they operate, how they think, how they look at things, how they perceive, how they manipulate, and what it does to their body. It causes actual harm to our bodies. It causes nervous system damage. It causes brain damage. It causes other organ damage. And it causes us to well, some people, most people, to feel intimidated, fearful, etc. When a person purposely causes another person harm, that is illegal. There are a type of law on the books. I'm not sure. I don't think they're in every state yet, but these laws could be used to deal with Trump. They're called the coercive control abuse laws.
Hmm.
First state was to add them to the books was Hawaii, then California, and I haven't kept track since then. I know New York was about to pass them. But the point is, and they're available also in certain provinces in Canada and throughout the UK and plenty of European states and Australia. The reason that those laws could deal with Trump, even right now, even before they are expanded as they need to be, is there are so many people who have been abused by Donald Trump and many other people who are politicians. If we could get to people who have had personal relationships with these individuals or immediate family members, the police would have to arrest these individuals and charge them with felony crimes. And well, there's human rights violations and all sorts of other laws that they are, that they, I can't think of the word right now. I'm distracted, but the point is individuals could bring these individuals down.
Well, Kai, your comment is both important and interesting. I think that we've discovered, I mean, someone asked right in the beginning, what if Biden had only done this right from the beginning? What Biden should have done is to not do what anybody else has done, to go right to the equivalent of Barr, go right to our Department of Justice, and say, prosecute now. No, the January 6th thing isn't finished. It's not over. Prosecute now. While the January 6th sting was so much around our country, we've discovered that our legal system, he's very clever and slippery about evading the legal system. And we've also discovered that our legal system, and maybe in many ways a blessing, gives people ample opportunity to challenge decisions again. Oh, wait, and again. Oh, wait, and again. Oh, wait, and again. On any little trivial tributary that might, eke out of a law. And so, here we sit. I mean, how long did it take Brazil to get rid of Bolsonaro? 1 minute. Out. What you did is outrageous. He didn't do anything close to what Trump did. You're out. That's it. He's gone. And now they can't run for office for years. I mean, they acted fast. And we have been so frustratingly slow. And in many ways, it's a tribute to our judicial system that there is a kind of justice that exists. On the other hand, we're all dealing with the consequences of that slow march forward. So I love the idea of challenging Trump and others. He's facing quite a few individual lawsuits. I don't know if you know that. They don't make the news very often.
If I could
But
just,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I do know that. What I'm saying though is he would be arrested on the spot because he's a danger to the people in his life. Everyone around him is in danger, and they would have to arrest him right away, and they'd keep him from they would keep him locked up, and then there would be other people coming forward. He would be part of what happens when a person is arrested for this and charged and so on is that they are forced to undergo psychiatric evaluations by several different individuals. And of course, they would have to make it plain that he is a personality disordered individual who is very, very high up on the narcissism and sadism spectrums, which would eliminate him from being of sound mind. He is unfit for purpose. So that's why I'm saying this could be done tomorrow. It could be done tomorrow, okay? But also,
that would be fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
taxpayers should also be livid about the fact that they are, so even the right wingers, because they're paying to keep abusers on the street, working in law enforcement, corrections, judiciary, etc. There's so many people who are cluster A, B, and C personality disordered individuals who work in positions of control, power, access to the vulnerable. There it is, and they even have, I mean, they get together, they have their, they speak out as well. And they have a phrase that says, what is it now? The love frauds are winning.
Yeah.
They know for them, life is a game and it's a challenge. It's a competition, right? They want to control, domineer, and destroy. That's their thing. They go after status, control,
Right.
power, money, etc.
Yeah, you
So,
nailed it. You
right.
absolutely have nailed it. And that as we know, most of the people who have been in his administration, in his cabinet, are all saying, "Oh my God, stay away from him." Not that that's having an influence, but Kai, that's exactly the kind of abuse that those people are feeling. Thank you so much for the lucidity with which you've spoken to this, Pete. And then we're going to have to finish. But Pete, I'm glad to see you. Hi.
Hi. We were at First Parish in Lexington, had the benefit of hearing from Diane more than a month ago. And so we've been actively trying to catch up with Concord Indivisible in terms of postcarding because of her question. But recently, just in the last couple of days, one of the folks that I regularly listen to, I think it might have been Heather Cox Richardson. Or perhaps
Robert Hubble.
yeah, Robert Hubble talked about the fact that with Trump verbally abusing the lawyer, the judges in his case, and now with this thing with Biden hogtied in the back of a pickup truck with all the American
Right.
flags on it,
This is
that
Kai.
that's an attack on the president, and that the security, the secret security folks should be called out to impound him and bring him in. That this is he's calling violence down on people, and there's no doubt about it. He's just so I hadn't heard about the coercive abuse laws, and I'm a little concerned about the state of our various levels of law of court system in the country right now. But it seems to me that here's something that could be done very quickly. And it's clearly obvious to everyone that this is abusive, and he's a danger to the country.
Pete, you're so right. And Kai, your articulation of this is so beautiful. And of course, we know this. Will anybody have the courage? And it is a question of courage, isn't it, Pete? The courage to act, because we're so afraid that we're going to be accused of being biased or being, nasty to Trump, when in fact, think of it the other way around.
I do think that the Secret Service, who took such abuse from him on January 6th,
Well, they sure did.
would be people who would be willing to accept that as their responsibility.
Wouldn't that be wonderful, Pete? So
Yeah.
now how do we mobilize that? And how do we take Kai's good advice and your encouragement and convert it into some sort of action? Maybe a letter to the editor, to the Boston Globe, to the Times,
The New York Times, yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be long. It can be given Kai's information and your conviction. You could make a poignant, quick, a statement to the Globe, and I'll bet the Globe would publish it.
Okay.
I mean, that would be wonderful. I know that we're up in terms of time, but I just want to thank everybody for your patience. This has been a very detailed and long conversation with lots of points, and I'm so grateful that you were. Now, Kai is saying she disagree. I'm sorry I didn't get to see what she said, but at any rate, I just want to thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. It's been a privilege. And I
Thank
wish
you, Diane.
Well, thank you, Andy. It's been really very lovely, and thank you so much. And I look forward to more conversations informally with all of you. So thank you.
All right, this concludes our meeting, and we'll have something next month for everybody. And please try to reclaim our democracy, save our democracy. It's too important to lose.
Boy, and it's more fragile than any of us thought.